I'd like to welcome everyone to another screencast from Mr. Klein Mathematics. We're going to be starting in this unit looking for Pythagoras. This actually comes from connected math, and throughout this unit we're going to be talking about a mathematician who lived more than 2,000 years ago and his most famous theorem called, not surprisingly, the Pythagorean theorem. But before we get into some of that, there are going to be certain skills and certain bits of knowledge that you're going to need to know for this particular unit. So let's begin with what is called the coordinate plane. Now, we've talked about that this year, and most of you have seen it over the last couple of years in school, but I'm just going to do a quick refresher course to make sure there's no confusion on how to work with a coordinate plane. And what we're going to be doing is coming up with what are called coordinates. That particular point that you just saw bouncing is a single point on this coordinate plane. And we have to come up with what is called the coordinate pair. That is a pair of numbers that goes with that particular point. If you look straight down to the horizontal line, that is called the x-axis. And you'll notice that the point is lined up with the number 3. If you look to the left, you will see a vertical axis called the y-axis. The number that that point lines up with on the vertical axis is 8. So we have two numbers that we have associated with that point. The 3 on the x-axis and the 8 on the y-axis. Those two numbers are put together into what is called a coordinate pair. Or we simply say that 3, 8 is the coordinate for that particular point. Let's look at a second example. If I put a dot over here on the left side, you'll see again it lines up with two numbers. It lines up with the -3 on the x-axis, the horizontal line, and it lines up with 4 on the y-axis. That's the vertical up and down axis. And again, those two numbers, -3 and 4, are put together to form a coordinate pair. And all you have to remember is that it's the number that it lines up with on the x-axis that always goes first. And that's the simple act of finding the coordinates for a point on a grid, on a coordinate plane like this. Another thing you're going to be asked to do is find what is called the distance between 2 points. Now, there's a couple ways to do this. At the beginning of this unit, we're going to talk about this grid as if it were the street layout of a town. So all the little gray lines you see going left and right and up and down are basically streets. Now, of course, you get into a helicopter and just fly directly from one spot in the town to another. That is what we call the slanted or tilted distance. And we are going to eventually work on that. In fact, that's the main point of the Pythagorean theorem, is finding that distance. But it is a little harder, and it's going to come a little later in the unit. So what we're going to look at now is what is called the taxicab distance. That is, as if you were driving on these streets and you needed to go from one point to another. So let's say we're going to start by driving straight to the left, that is, a horizontal distance. And you'll notice that we start at 2 on the x-axis, and we end up at -5. Well, going from 2 to 0 is 2 blocks or 2 units, and going from 0 to -5 is another 5 units or 5 blocks. And so we say that the total distance straight across horizontally is 7 units. Then our taxicab makes a right turn and it moves to the north. That is, it's going to go up a certain number of units. And if you count the squares that it goes through, it goes from 3 on the y-axis to 6 on the y-axis for a total of 3 units. And so we've gone a total taxicab distance of 10 units. Another thing you're going to be asked to do in this unit is to form rectangles or other shapes given some points. So let's say I gave you those 3 points and I asked you to find a 4th point that would form a rectangle. Well, if you look at it for a while, it's pretty obvious that that 4th point would be right there, and you get yourself a nice rectangle. But let's make this one a little harder. Let's say instead of those original 3 points, I give you a 3rd point there. And I'd like you to find the fourth point that will form a rectangle. Well, now it might seem at first to be a little bit strange until you realize that rectangles don't have to lay straight across. They can tilt. And once you recognize that, you can put your fourth point, let's say right there, forming what is called a tilted rectangle. In any case, again, thank you for visiting Mr. Klein Mathematics. This was just a quick introduction of a couple of skills that are going to be used in our Looking for Pythagoras unit. So a couple of the terms that we did see today that you're going to be required to know are the coordinate plane, the x-axis to y-axis, and what we mean by a coordinate pair. And again, I'd like to thank everyone for stopping by today, and you may visit some of the other Mr. Klein videos and screencasts at your leisure. Thank you.